What did your wife say when you told her you went into Ovidio's house?
I don't think we even had much time to really think about it, or for her or my family to actually think about it. Like, I woke up that morning when they captured a video, and 3 days later, I was booking tons of flights to Culiacan.
That's when I see lights behind me start to flash. And I didn't even think, I just hit it. I was driving like my life depended on it. Then I parked the car, hopped out, closed the door, and I started running.
And he pulls out a burner, a shank, it's like 6 inches. And he passes it to me. And he goes, here, that's yours. Don't ever leave the cell block without this. He was the reason I made it out of that place alive.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Connect. My name is Johnny Mitchell. We're here in the new studio podcasting. Thank you for joining us. You guys, if you're a member of the Patreon and you want to participate in the show, we'll actually take your calls and your questions and read them out on the show. Dial that number you see at the bottom of the screen. Brian, let them know what it is.
213-632-8176. That is 213-632-8176.
You got it. So sign up for the Patreon right now. Patreon.com/TheConnectShow. We'll answer any kind of advice questions you have. Many of you have been DMing me asking for my drug connects. Let's not do that, you guys. I'm out of the game. Those connects are for me if I ever have to get back into it. But if you are a Patreon member, I don't know, maybe if you're in Colombia and you want to, get hooked up with somebody, we might just do that for you. Okay. So patreon.com/TheConnectShow. You guys, we have an amazing show for you today. We're talking about the anti-mafia trials, the biggest in history going on in Italy right now. Talk about the capture of one of the Sicilian Cosa Nostra bosses after 30 years on the lam. We talk about Louis C.K., his comeback, Madison Square Garden, bunch of other fun stuff. Then the big kahuna at the end of this episode, we are going to be patching in our boy, Luis Chapparro, a good friend of the show, Vice News journalist. We're going to be talking about the capture of Ovidio in Culiacan, Sinaloa, where we were just 2 months ago, and what sparked off all of that violence. So we've got a great show for you today. Let's get into it. All right, guys, let me tell you about today's sponsor, our favorite online dispensary, Mood. You guys, let me tell you about these new gummies they got out. These new rapid onset fire gummies. These things will have you fucked up in like 10 minutes, dude. They hit the bloodstream faster than that fucking gram of heroin you've been shooting in your veins. Get off the junk. Come over to the junk food, gummies, baby. Look it. We got some shit to help you wake up in the morning. It comes with black pepper extract. We got some shit that will focus you if you need to study. And then we got some shit, I don't know what it does. I think it's super strength. You gotta be careful with these. Head over to hellomood.co right now. Use promo code CONNECT20 to get 20% off of your first order. Or use a promo code CONNECTFREE to get a free 5-count pack of gummies delivered straight to you. Guys, support them because they support the show. Get fucked up. Life is short. You know what I mean? I'm about to take a pack of these and go fly off the roof right there. All right, let's get back into the show. You guys, I was in New York City last month. Actually, no, a couple of weeks ago with my producer, Brian. That was amazing. We got about 5 different videos that we're going to be releasing over the next coming weeks. We shot with a man named Unique. That's his street name, our boy. One of the biggest Harlem black drug kingpins of the 1980s. So if you've seen movies like Paid in Full, if you've listened to rappers from the 90s and the early 2000s like Dipset, Cameron, Jim Jones, all of those dudes, all of that entertainment came from stories based around guys like Unique Mecca. So these were dudes that were making millions of dollars a week wholesaling cocaine to crack dealers between 1985 and 1993 or 1994 when he went to prison. It was unbelievable. Okay. I went back to Washington Heights and went to the neighborhoods where I used to send all of my weed wholesale to. So if you're a fan of the show, you know that I had 2 main buyers, right, for my West Coast pot. It was my Guinea friends out of Philadelphia in the South Jersey area, and it was my Dominicanos out of Washington Heights. That's where all of the best pot from the West Coast used to get shipped to was the Heights. And we're going to be talking to Dominicans that are still involved in the industry. It was like, dude, we got exclusive access that no white people have probably ever gotten. I'm willing to say that. I'm willing to say that we had like what Luis Chapparro has when he goes to Mexico is what we had in Harlem, in Washington Heights, in the South Bronx. It was nuts, dude. And we're just kicking it with like these old kingpins, and they live like 20-year-olds. They're out partying 5 nights a week. They took us to this club in the South Bronx that was fucking crazy. I mean, it was like being in Jamaica or something like that. We stood out like black guys on hockey teams, or I guess in this case, white guys, you know, on, I don't know, Jamaican soccer teams. It was quite the experience. Did you have a good time, Brian?
Yeah, it was, for me, the wildest part was meeting all these people. And then, you know, because of who I am, I then will like look people up and then finding out who they actually were. Lou, hands down, the wildest one.
We hung out with a man named Homicide Lou. This was his ubiquitous street name. The ladies at church called him Homicide Lou. These are some of the characters that come from the 80s in Harlem. And after 30 years, everybody's out of prison and they're back kicking it again. Like we were up at this lounge. What's it called, Brian? What lounge? We could shout it out.
Legends
Lounge. Legends Lounge on 154th Street. And we're kicking it with all these gangsters. And they're all like the nicest dudes. They're funny. They're unassuming. They love Brian. Everywhere we go, all the gangsters take a shine to Brian, the man behind the camera, who Unique as dubbed the genius. It's just like, it was kind of surreal. And it was, by the way, these dudes, by all accounts, should be doing life without parole. Well, we can say that because we're not giving up any real dirt, but the stuff that they've gotten away with would have ordinary people locked up forever. So it's kind of, and I think it was lost on them a little bit because they're so deep in the street life. It's kind of lost on them about how lucky they are.
No, I don't think it is at all. I think that's exactly why they live that 20-year-old lifestyle that you're talking about is a lot of these guys did have life without parole.
Right.
And got clemency and beat it. And so they're like, I'm going to go get those 3 decades back. I'm going to relive the years that I lost. Yeah,
that's true. I guess they are grateful, right? They're very grateful. And yeah, they're just out there. They're just out there wilding. A lot of them out there hustling again on the low. But our boy Unique is, you know, telling his stories on YouTube. So go check him out, by the way. Unique Mecca Audio on YouTube. You're going to see all of this content very soon. But what's happening is now we've decided to start podcasting and dropping these episodes on Thursdays and then leaking the travel episodes that we do when we get to them. Hopefully they're once a week. We don't know. We're still rocking as a 2-man team, more or less. So it was just like, I mean, it's just the best place on earth. New York City is just, and Harlem is no different. Like you see why guys like Unique were and Alpo, right? Which we weren't allowed to talk about, but dude, Unique is telling us stories about Alpo Martinez, who, if you pay attention, you know, he was the rat. He was the big time, flashy, flamboyant kingpin from the 80s who, you know, murdered, you know, dozens of people. And then, of course, he turned state's evidence and, you know, ratted, told the whole shit, ended up getting killed. We actually saw, they brought us to the bar where he was shot to death a few years ago when he came back to Harlem. That was an amazing experience. That was really like, I really felt like, wow, we are like in it. So check those out coming up. Let's get to the topics for today. What do we got first? Our mafia trial.
The Ndrangheta.
The Ndrangheta. The Ndrangheta. Yeah. The Ndrangheta is the mafia out of Calabria, which is at the boot of Italy, at the very bottom. Now, they are having one of the biggest mafia trials, maybe the biggest mafia trial in the history of Italy is going on right now. They nabbed like 350 defendants and they're putting them all on trial. So go look into the Italian mafias. Put aside what we know about Cosa Nostra and the Sicilians for a second. Just put that aside, okay? The main Italian mafia now, the main mafia is from Italy. It's not from Sicily. And because they were the first mafia to basically get into drug dealing or high-level cocaine trafficking. That's kind of what propelled the Italian mafia to supersede and get bigger than the Sicilians. So they got that port at the base of Italy. Brian, could you look up what that port is called? So the port at the boot of Italy in Calabria is the main offloading site for South American cocaine. It's Spain and it's Italy. And this is the reason that the
Vibo Valentia.
How do you pronounce it?
Is it Vibo Valentia?
That's what it is. Vibo Valentia. That is the main port. It's one of the biggest ports in the Mediterranean, and it's where 80% of the cocaine that gets shipped from South America first lands. So you can imagine this has made the Calabrians billionaires, okay? And they're living, go look at those little towns. Go research what their territory looks like. They're living up in the mountains. They're living a lot like the Sinaloans that we just documented. Wouldn't you say, Brian? Like they're farmers, they're villagers who live underground. Literally, they build tunnels to hide from the authorities. They, live in the mountains. They do whatever they can, and they're on the lam for years. But they're trafficking in like as much cocaine as the Mexicans, for sure. For sure. What were you about to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is culturally they grew up in these kind of more rural parts.
Yes.
But I also think you're going to be heading one of the largest crime organizations in the world. Probably don't want a lot of neighbors. Probably don't want to be too close.
That's a great point. That is a great point too. It's the geography that allows them to elude capture. When you're from a tiny little town, you know all your neighbors too. You know all your neighbors. Your neighbors are dirt poor. This is the region of southern Italy is one of the poorest in all of the EU. Okay. So this is what makes for a mafia. It's a perfect breeding ground for how the mafia even started, right? Like I'm fascinated with how a crime cartel, a crime syndicate, a mafia, whatever you want to call it, how does it grow? How does it start? How does it grow? And what are the factors that allow it to survive and thrive, right? So if you look at Sicily, for example, the mafia in Sicily, what we know in America as the Cosa Nostra, our thing, began in Sicily in the 1870s because there was a gigantic worldwide boom, demand for lemons. And the people who grew the lemons were the Sicilians. They have the best fruit in the world, I guess. I guess they get the best fucking lemons. And so the gangsters, the wise guys, who were basically just, bandits, right? Because, back in the day, Sicily was barely formed as a nation. It wasn't even part of Italy, I don't think. I think it had just become part of Italy, right? And so they're dirt poor. They've been persecuted historically by Rome, by the Moors, by England. I mean, so many by the Spanish. So many people have tried to conquer that little island over the years. So it's in their blood to fight, and they hate authority. You know what I'm saying? This is what makes the spirit of a bandit, of a bandito. So it was that cultural, it was that counterculture coupled with economic opportunity that began the mafia. So basically what these bandits started doing is they started extorting the lemon farmers. They started extorting these big oligarchs who owned all of the lemon fields and were exporting them all over the world and making huge money. And basically the mafia went to these lemon farmers and said, hey, we'll pay to protect you. And if you don't pay us for the protection, then we will fuck your shit up. And that's how extortion started.
To go further into what you're talking about with it, a lot of it being like very rural farmers. This arrest that kicked off this whole story from last week, right? This huge crackdown on Ndrangheta. It says right here in this article, the allegations against those arrested Thursday include the transport and sale of stolen farm machinery to Malta and Romania.
There you go. So these guys are into everything. And Luis, in our interview at the end of the episode, talks about how the Mexican cartels are actually becoming a lot like the Italian mafia in that drugs are just one piece of their overall business plan. So the Italian mafia thrives because they're into everything. They're into bribery and extortion of businesses. That's the classic Italian earner, right? That's the classic Italian mafia business is a piso. So you just go around, and it's still $1 billion industry in Sicily. It's just extorting businesses. Every week you go around to the bread maker, the restaurant, the hotel, the, whatever brings in cash, and you just collect. You got a route, right? And that's what the Italians in New York were doing for years. So you got extortion, but it's way more than that. You got cocaine import. You have theft and sales of heavy machinery, right? You have public works contracts. So guys will come and they will infiltrate like somebody in the local government. And when bidding comes up on contracts for, paving roads, building hospitals, right? Tons of construction. Guess who gets those contracts? Guess who fixes those contracts with no competition? It's the mob, right? And they're into, loan sharking, lending, all of it. So if one business fails, right? If the price of cocaine is down, no problem. We still got money coming in from 30 different sources. Diversification. That's what allows businesses to thrive. That's why private equity companies, on Wall Street have their fingers in all these different pies, because if one stock is up and one is down, that's okay. Profit is still consistent. So getting back to what makes a mafia, it's culture. It's culture. It's culture mixed with poverty, mixed with absence of a government that takes care of its people. So case in point, Southern Italy. You have corruption at a level, almost third world levels, right? Mexico, same thing. When we were in Sinaloa, the government was the cartel. And it's very obvious because the so-called elected representatives do nothing for the people. You need new roads, you go to El Mayo. You need a hospital built, you talk to Los Chapitos. Of course, it comes at a price, a tax, but hey, the taxes you pay to your so-called real government aren't doing anything. They're just going to line the pockets of the politicians. Same thing happens in Sicily, or at least historically happened in Sicily and Southern Italy. So the legitimate government is the mafia. The cartels, the mafia, they're seen as more legitimate than the state. Now that's changing. That's changed in Italy. Italy's caught up in many ways to the rest of Europe. But still, during COVID, when COVID was locked down and businesses needed to survive because they couldn't do business anymore, they needed loans. They weren't getting them from the Italian state. They were getting them from the mafia. And now guess what? After everything opens, they owe the mafia a favor. So that same kind of culture, that same kind of outlaw culture that we saw in Mexico, right? It's banditos, it's Robin Hood, it's standing up to a government that is corrupt and that fucks over poor people. And this goes back centuries. That is what allows these criminal groups to become mafias, right? So if you look at the Italians and the Sicilians in New York, right? The Cosa Nostra out of the East Coast, they don't have any numbers anymore. They need bodies because the mafioso, the New York mob, their children go on to become doctors and lawyers and politicians and whatever, because they're because it's America. There's just more opportunity, right? You don't have to, there isn't a culture of this generational criminality, right? Like the mentality in America for the American mafia is, well, look, I'm going to lead a life of crime because my children will not have to. I'm going to make this illegal money. I'm going to take this money off the street so my kids will have a better future and don't have to live the life that I live. So in order to get bodies, they got to actually bring recruits over from Sicily, from the old country, to even keep the thing going. So, but it's not like that on the other side. It's not like that in Mexico. The idea is passing along the crime families. So the Ndrangheta is a collection of clans. It's built like Sinaloa is built now. There's not one hierarchical structure anymore. It's a bunch of different clans tied in by blood, by family, by marriage, whatever, who are just making money hand over fist, and they're into everything. And it passes along. They train the kids from a young age. You know, they give the kids guns at 10, take them up into the mountains, and they teach them how to shoot. That's how you recruit soldiers in the mountains of Sinaloa, right? It's all the poor kids that get brought up in the system, and to them, it's normal. So, but, you know, the state is fighting back in Italy. That will eventually happen in Mexico. I see, even though Mexico's fucked up right now, I think we're going to move our manufacturing, the U.S., the goods that we manufacture and consume that were made in China. I think that's going to start happening. We're going to move that to Mexico. That's going to force Mexico to come after the mafia, the cartels more and more, as it becomes more of a wealthy, legitimate society. So, but yeah, that's kind of what's happening in Italy right now. But it's not stopping anything. I mean, they arrest 300 guys and 600 more take their place.
Speaking of arrests, one of the heads of La Cosa Nostra was just arrested.
That's right. So in
Italy.
He was arrested in Italy?
Yes.
I thought it was, okay, so he's a Sicilian, but he was arrested in Italy.
Correct.
What was his name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe he was arrested it might have actually been in Sicily. You might be correct about that. But the guy's name is Matteo Messina Denaro.
Matteo Messina Denaro. Yes, this dude was on the run for...
It was in Sicily.
It was in Sicily. So this was one of the most ruthless, old school Padrino godfathers from the 80s. And that was during a time in Sicily when they were making war against the state. So go do your Sicilian mafia history research. They were making war on the state almost at a level that Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel was warring against the Colombian government back in the 80s. It was wild. I mean, they were setting off bombs in public. They were killing prosecutors. They were massacring innocent people. They went way too far with it, right? So one of those dudes that orchestrated all of that, one of those old school godfathers, he was finally captured. He was on the lam for 30 years, I think it was.
30, yeah.
Now read off some of the murders he committed. If you just scroll down in that article, I mean, this dude was wild. He was doing extra, as the black people say.
The president of Italy, I believe former president of Italy, his brother was murdered in 1980 while serving as Sicily's governor.
There you go. By guys who worked for Denaro. And I mean, keep going down. I think he's killing kids, torturing kids.
Yeah. He kidnapped and strangled a kid.
Yes. You murdered a pregnant woman because she was, affiliated with a rival clan, I think.
Taking out just the family members of guys that had turned.
Yeah, right. So it was really that era, the 80s, that all of the old school rules around Cosa Nostra, you don't harm families, you don't go after politicos, you keep a low profile, you definitely don't hurt civilians, right? Because you need the civilians, you need the normal population to have your back, to view you as legitimate, right? Or else what are they going to do? They're going to go to the government. They're going to call the cops. All of those rules kind of went out in the 80s, right? That's when you see the mafia kind of turn and become this terrorist organization, for lack of a better term. And you know me, guys, I'm with the criminals. I'm pro-crime. It's a pro-crime podcast, but we're not with the murdering of innocent people. I don't like to see any of that. That's where the mafia really took a turn for the worst. And that was basically its downfall, was the 80s and 90s. That's when the state of Italy stepped in, and they are now, I would say they're neck and neck. In Mexico, the cartels are still looked at as more legitimate than the actual government. In Italy, it's about 50-50. And maybe even regular people might even view the government, the state, as more legitimate now than the mafia.
Yeah, apparently when they arrested this guy, just like bystanders outside the hospital started applauding the arrest.
Right. See, there you go. So 20 years ago, it would have been the opposite. So if you go, you got to read this book by, what is the man's name? It's one of the best reads. It's about the mafia in Naples, right? So they went to arrest one of the main clan leaders in this neighborhood in Naples called Secondigliano. And Brian and I actually want to go over there and film. He wrote Gomorrah. Got to go read Gomorrah. And it's a great TV show, even better movie. But this guy was saying that when they went to arrest one of the leaders of the clans, the citizens actually came out and tried to stop the cops. They were throwing rocks at him. You know, old women were saying, blah, 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 leave him be. He's a good boy. You know, that's the difference, right? Is now you're saying, yes, get this piece of shit. So that's what always happens. That's people abuse power.
I mean, that was the Escobar thing, right? He had the backing of everybody, but when he bombed a public area, the car bomb that killed, countless
almost like 100 people, killed a little girl,
that's how the government was able to turn, the public against him,
right,
and gain favor.
Right, exactly. And that's how the Clan de Cali, the Cali cartel, that's how they were actually able to last longer, make way more money, is because they kept their bloodletting on the low. And in general, well, not even in general, I think they almost never killed innocent people. They were pretty ruthless within their own organization, but they had the will of the people. And that's what Sinaloa does well. That's what the Sinaloa cartel does better than the other Mexican mafias, is they just take care of their citizens. It's the reason that Los Zetas didn't last. They were too brutal. It's the reason that I think, my prediction is that Jalisco will not last if they keep acting too much like a terroristic military organization. So you go read, I'm telling you, go read Gomorrah. It is the best book. If you read one book, go read Days of the Trap by Johnny Mitchell, and go read Gomorrah by Roberto Saviano, and go watch the movie. But you got to read the book, because you see how smart the mafia is. You see how sophisticated they are, and they're just money getters. Like they're able to look at things. They're almost artists. Brian, I'm going to go as far as to say they're almost artistic in the way they're able to look at an ordinary business, an ordinary part of society. They're able to look at a hospital and be like, I should be selling them gowns. I should be getting hospital contracts. I should be selling them needles for their diabetes patients. Whatever it is, they're able to squeeze money out of. It's brilliant.
Well, it was I'm trying to remember which cartel it is, but Luis wrote a story not that long ago about one of it might be Sinaloa, it might be Jalisco. One of them basically started to siphon water off of the natural water source, and they're essentially stealing all the water and selling it to people at a premium, because all the water reserves were starting to go down, that they found basically a river, a creek that they started to siphon water off of to make sure that all of their crops had enough water, so that they wouldn't, lose any crops. And then B, they were able to sell the water sources at a premium to any other farms or anybody else that needed it.
Unreal. So it's a double pop. It's kind of, it's evil genius. That's how I would describe it. So that's our mafia news for today.
Real quick, speaking of genius, how they caught this guy is pretty insane. So obviously they have struggled for 3 decades to find him. Through wiretaps and all that, they essentially learned that he had a specific type of cancer that needed a very specific type of treatment.
Oh, this is how they caught Donato.
Yes.
This is how they caught the Sicilian
they
Godfather.
Just started a database going through all of the hospitals and patients that were coming in for this very specific treatment, and basically narrowed it down to a couple. And they just had people waiting outside. And he went in for this treatment under, an assumed name.
Yeah.
And they essentially like approached him, pulled up pictures because they didn't even know what he looked like.
Unbelievable.
A lot like Mayo.
Mayo.
There's a lot of people thinking maybe he had plastic surgery, all of that, and essentially they just were like, let's wait and let's look at every single person going to get this treatment, and that's how they eventually caught this guy.
Crazy. So these guys they literally live underground for years. So they build tunnels underneath the earth in the mountains of Sicily or Calabria. They will have construction companies, electricians, plumbers dig down, I don't know, a couple 100 feet, right? Like they're building a parking garage, and they will outfit entire houses underground. So literally, and these guys will live there. They will live underground in these bunkers for decades and still be able to control the people on the outside to do their bidding, to control the drugs and any other kind of business they're involved in. So they don't even know what these guys look like. 30 years is a long time. You look much different than you did as a young man. So, it's not the way I would want to live, right? Like, because when you're forced to live underground and constantly in hiding, it's like being in prison in many ways. But dude, it's how they get respect. Hey, the way that we get respect as podcasters in Los Angeles is the way that young men in southern Italy get respect as criminals, as these figures that are Robin Hoods, they're bandits. And, they just keep getting recruits because the economy ain't getting any better over there. It's hard to make a buck in Italy. So, it is what it is. I don't think it's going to stop anything. I think the drugs will keep flowing. I think the mafia will be there for a long time. It's just going to be harder to operate as a mafioso there. You got to watch your back because they're coming for him, and they're giving him life without parole now too. And I think you have even less rights over there. I mean, the standard for the burden of proof to find you guilty in Italian court is a lot lower. And they made it that way intentionally because they're just rounding guys up and flushing them down the toilet. So, I don't think the mafia, I don't think it's a good enterprise anymore. I don't think it's like a legitimate or illegitimate way, a good way to kind of ascend in the criminal underworld. I think the way Mexico has it set up is at least a little, at least if you're an enterprising drug trafficker, it's a lot more profitable in my opinion. But, then again, guys over there are always finding ways to make huge money too. So yeah, I mean, go check it out and go read that fucking book. What else we got on here?
Louis C.K.
Louis C.K. made his triumphant return to Madison Square Garden the other night. He sold out Madison Square, 18,000 people. He live streamed it. Apparently it's like he keeps topping himself. I didn't watch it. I'm going to go watch it later. But, this guy's back. Hasn't been at Madison Square Garden, MSG, since before he got canceled back in, I think it was 2017. But it's so funny because I went on Twitter just to kind of look up, what people were saying about it. I've been off Twitter for like 6 months. It's like being off drugs. It's amazing. You just go live your life and are happy. And then you get back on Twitter and you're instantly depressed and angry. These are the two emotions that Twitter gets you hooked to. And you see people like, this monster, how can you call cancel culture real? Well, first of all, he's never coming back to traditional Hollywood. Never. Like what he did, he'll never have HBO, development deals again. He'll never be getting TV shows greenlit. He's still and forever will be blacklisted by what we call the legacy media. That is traditional Hollywood outlets, right? Yes, he has the great fortune of having millions of people who will buy his own, specials and television shows from his website, and they will pay tickets to come see him perform. But he's never going to be back in the halls of Hollywood power. Okay, so let's make that very clear. Cancel culture is real. Doesn't mean you can't make money off of it. But I just wanted to point out the hypocrisy, okay, of so-called leftists or, woke progressive people on the internet who want Louis C.K.'s head, yeah, but they also want like justice for, people that have been abused by cops or drug dealers who deserve second chances, who got, hit with insanely harsh sentences back in the 80s and 90s. They want them to be able to get out and get second chances, right? Which they deserve. I totally am in agreement with that. But yet this guy who made a mistake, Louis, didn't do anything criminal, I don't think, right? I mean, certainly he did something, a fireable offense. I will grant him that. I'm trying to be balanced on this podcast. He absolutely committed an act in which you should probably be fired from your job. Okay. You're off in front of people that don't want it, or that clearly there's like a dubious power relationship there, right? That's a guy who should probably have to step down. But is there no way back? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see it? How long do people who get canceled have to stay in prison, the prison of public opinion? That's what I want to know, right? Certainly, sure. Have him go do his time. Have him do his time just the way that Unique Mecca from Harlem had to go do his time, right? Remember, he told us himself, he was like, dude, I was wildin'. I had to go sit down for a little bit. That's what he said. He was like, I had to go sit down. But I didn't deserve life. They gave this dude life at, 29 years old. He didn't deserve to do life in prison. Louis C.K. does not deserve to do life in cancel culture prison. He just didn't. It just didn't merit that. Harvey Weinstein, Cosby, absolutely. Different thing, much different thing. I mean, Harvey Weinstein's literally doing life in real prison. And Cosby is just the luckiest motherfucker on the face of planet Earth. Cosby's out there touring again. Did you hear this? Cosby's, and I will be opening for him, you guys, because I need the stage time. Kidding. Cosby is going to be out touring again. So, yeah, I mean, it almost should be like written into like the rules of these corporations. How long after you commit an act that is unbecoming of the organization that you work for, whether that be HBO, whether that be Netflix, how long after you get fired for doing something outside of work that's unbecoming of the brand that you represent, how long before you get to come back and be like, hey, that was weird, but everybody's human. Let's move on. Because that's what happens, with guys, just normal, ordinary white collar guys that are, serve on the board of directors of whatever, a corporation, a company, right? Like the guy over the pandemic, he was a CEO. He got cut off over a Zoom call because he didn't realize he was a boomer. He didn't realize he had not turned his camera off, and he was beating his meat. Right? It's mortifying. That guy will be back sitting on the board of another company. Okay. So and again, it's because entertainers are out there, right? Entertainers are in the public eye, but I think that, I think people are just a little mad. People are a little mad that somebody who does something that they may want to do. Many people wish they had the talent that Louis has to stand in front of 18,000 people and deliver the best stand-up comedy performance that you're probably ever going to be able to see, right? So I think a lot of this is just straight up player hate. And I think it's hate. I think it's jealousy. And they want to take a guy down that had this to say about open borders, right? And I'm assuming these people are all leftists. They're all for, immigrants' rights, and they're all for just letting people in and letting people have homeless tents in front of their houses, at least that's what they say. This is what the monster Louis C.K. had to say about the border policy. Ryan, play the tape.
But my feeling is they should open the border, and just let them pour in, let everybody pour in, and then the answer, which is, well, then there'll be all these problems. Yes, there should be. It shouldn't be so great here, is what I'm saying. In America, it shouldn't be. It's a weird thing to sequester a certain group of people and try to keep upping their lifespan and their lifestyle, and just keep trying to increase that for this group of people, and then this pressure of people trying to come in so they can enjoy it. And then it gets worse and worse down here. I mean, I'm not in Canada. It's really just from down here. There's something wrong with that. That's not a system that's working. And it forces people to do cruel things to other people. There's a lot of people that die so Americans can be safe. They're just dying, weddings that are drone bombed in Yemen because the guy said something that might have resulted in American insecurity. Not even like definite American deaths, but like just so we can breathe a little easier. Folks die. And folks do labor in unsafe places so that we can keep the prices where we like them. There's so much about American life that other people pay for. That's part of it. But also, it's not good for us either. It's not a good way to live in a gated community. If you let folks pour in, like any other wave, it'll kind of slosh. And then things will be different. I don't know, what'll really happen? A bunch of people, will they just come with knives and start killing everybody? I don't think so.
There you go. Louis believes in an open border policy. Now, let's discuss this for a minute. I don't know if it has any merit, but this guy's obviously like a friend to the poor. I mean, he is Mexican himself. He was born in Mexico. But this is what I'm talking about. He's not a guy. He's not a bad dude. He's not a bad dude. He did kind of a weird thing. We all have our kinks, but free Louis. Free Louis is free. Louis is making his money. I don't know about this open border policy. My producer Brian. My producer Brian is sort of a communist. Although these checks, we're whittling him down. The money we've been making off this channel, we're turning him into a socialist. We're working him from hardcore Stalinist commie, and we're slowly shifting him a little. I guess it would be this way, right? I think we're about a socialist now. By next year, you're gonna have you be a corporate Democrat by next year.
You couldn't be further off from all of that. First of all, syndicalism,
anarcho-syndicalist, right?
Yeah.
You're not a big fan of private property and money. We get it. All opinions are respected here. What do you think about an open border policy like Louis proposes? Just letting people come here.
I mean, I've got no problem with it. I think that it's a lot like what you've literally said in every other segment of this episode is people always find a way,
Yeah.
And the idea that, there's this insane finite amount of resources is a farce. We know that.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
I mean, if you really want me to get into it, the corporations run everything. They are the ones who hoard all of the resources, who hoard the majority of land, who hoard the majority of anything people need to, live a comfortable life. And they are the ones that are worried about having control over who comes in, who doesn't. All these lies that were fed about, even down to like environmentalist issues.
Mhm.
They go after the everyday person, right? It's you using a plastic bag. It's you using a watering your lawn. You using straws, right? Like but these are also the same corporations that are using way more natural resources than any individual, person in this country, all individual people in this country put together combined will ever use. And it's the same idea with border policies, right? Like there aren't enough jobs to go around. Like I think all of that is a farce. Like I absolutely think that the border should be open. I've got no qualms against that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I think you got to have a border or else you don't have a country. Now, maybe we are moving away from nation states. This is a whole other political argument. There is this idea that the nation state is a very old, antiquated thing. But look, dude, what you're saying about the powers that be, the corporations and the government, putting the blame for all of these ills on the individual is totally right. They want to stop you from having a plastic bag, but John Kerry, right, the World Economic Forum, they want to tell you to use less resources. They all flew to Davos on private jets. So what my liberal or leftist producer is saying,
first of all, don't ever call me liberal.
Leftist producer is saying is actually in line with what guys who've been painted as like right-wing people are saying when they talk about globalism or, the Great Reset, right? What conspiracy theorists are saying, which some of it is meritable, some of it is not. But they both sides are saying a lot of the same thing, which is the people who are really doing the fucking are the ones at the top. It's not people fleeing MS-13. It's not Mexicans and Salvadorans and Hondurans and Guatemalans coming here that are ruining the cities, right? Now, I think you do see a little bit of a spike in crime. If you look at Miami, for instance, when the Muriel, what was it called? The Muriel boat lift of 1981 happened. That's when Castro emptied his jails, his prisons. He took all his homeless people from Cuba and he shipped them all to Miami. There was a big spike in crime. There's no doubt about that, right? Also, it's because he shipped over like exclusively criminals, right? So there is the potential of that happening if you open the borders, okay? But I think that's temporary. I think that's very temporary. I think long term, we need people, okay? Population is declining. Population all over the world, especially in first world countries, is declining. I mean, I go to try to get help from a rental car place, from wherever. Nobody's working. A hotel, everything's automated because nobody wants to work. So you need a labor force, right? So the corporations are shooting themselves in the foot if they want to keep people out because they need immigrant labor. And, so I think it's a net positive. But to Louis' point, how many us protecting everything that the government does to protect just this little country is to the detriment of somebody else, which is fascinating because the reason we do live so affluent, don't kid yourself. Now, I love the empire because I get to live better than almost any human being in the history of time has gotten to live. But I know that's on the backs of, third world countries that we fuck over, that we, get our goods produced for nothing and get shipped over here. And it's because of our military that our dollar is pegged. Everybody else pegs their dollar to our currency. We're the global reserve currency. That means we have more buying power. We get to have all this affluence because we can just buy more shit. What Louis is saying is like, that's not fair to everybody else. So, hey, I don't have the solution, but Louis like, dude, Louis a good guy. So that's what I have to say about Louis.
Sounds like you're trying to turn the means of production back over to the workers. Interesting, Johnny.
Well, but even then, that commie shit doesn't work either because you do that, it's always going to be a few people that produce everything, do all the work, do the best work, and will eventually become corrupted. Groups become corrupt. This is the reason that, every social movement gets co-opted by a few scoundrels. And there is, the Black Panthers is a great example of that. Black Panthers started out as this very homegrown, egalitarian social movement back in Oakland in the 60s because, they didn't have enough traffic signs for stop signs and kids were getting run over by cars. And it was like this very equal grassroots movement. But then by the end, Huey P. Newton smoking crack and, doing all this demonic shit.
Well, wasn't it the infiltration of the CIA of that organization that shut it down?
Yeah, but Brian, we're not going to get into a political debate because I tell you, every single movement, the Bolsheviks, you name me one, give me an example of where workers controlling everything actually functions. It doesn't. There's always a hierarchy because most people are lazy. Most people don't do things good. Case in point, podcasting. We are an oligarchic podcast. We produce most of the views in podcasting, okay? 99% of the podcasts produce nothing, right? And then, 0.1%, Joe Rogan has 98% of all the views. We are a 1% podcast and we have like 1% of the views. This is natural. This is just the way life is. Most people produce nothing. A shred of people produce everything. So I think if you have, I think if you try to organize society that way, money is always going to flow to a few people at the top. Just is what it is. But fuck it. Open the border. I don't give a shit. But I'll tell you who wants a closed border too, Brian, just because we can bring this back to crime. You know who would like a closed border? The cartels. Don't you agree? Cartels want a closed border. Why? Because it's harder to get dope here. And what's harder to get dope here, the price of the brick goes up. So, and that's what, conservatives, people that want to crack down on the cartel that's infiltrating American cities, that's what they're too stupid to realize that. They're on the same side as the people they want to go to war against. I promise you that. Anyways, what do we got? Church. God damn it. Are we cussing too much? We got to get this. We got to take out some of the cuss words.
All right. So up next, you want to talk about Shauna Rae?
You want to talk about a crime in the making. Shauna Rae, she is apparently she's got her own reality show, I believe, on TLC. She's like a little person. She looks like a little Oompa Loompa. She had a tumor as a kid, and she's now 23 years old, but she looks like a second grader. And she is in a full-fledged relationship with a grown-ass man, a 24-year-old man. Ryan, scroll up. We're actually going to pop this picture up so you can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, that woman is 22 or 23 years old, and that's her boyfriend. So what I'm saying is the law, the authorities are taking a good hard look at this guy, and they're at least saying, hey, let's keep our eye on this. Because that takes balls. If you know anything about going to prison for, statutory rape, that her boyfriend, that takes a guy willing to take a chance. I mean, I would have to take her ID and run it through a TSA ID scanner to make sure that shit is legitimate. I mean, there you go. I mean, it's adorable. She deserves to be in a healthy sexual relationship if she is 23 years old, just like any woman. But yeah, you look like you want to weigh in on this.
No, I'm reading about this. Because obviously he's not doing anything illegal, right? Like, she is an adult.
Sure.
And the circumstances are pretty rough. She had brain cancer as a child, and through the treatment, is what, gave her this rare condition, of essentially stunted growth, right? Like, it's like Webster and like those old, who was what you talking about, Willis?
Oh, yeah. Oh, she had who you talking about, Willis? Gary Coleman.
Gary Coleman.
This is the Gary Coleman thing.
I don't know if it's the exact same, but it's similar to that, right? Where you're going to look like a child for the rest of your life.
Right.
Now she does say, I'm just reading in this, that basically she's had to, and I can only imagine how difficult this is as an adult person that looks like a child, and dating has had to filter through creeps, like guys that were interested for all of the wrong reasons.
Sure.
And she essentially said that, having this her entire life has made her pretty good at filtering out
who's a pedo,
and the weirdos. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's, it says in here somewhere about how a lot of times these guys would talk to her like a child, and that this guy that she's seeing now was like, treated her like an adult, like a person, like has not treated her any differently. And, You got to respect that. Like that's
No, absolutely.
I can't imagine what it would be like having to enter the dating pool looking like a child as an adult. And so like the merits of, hey, this guy has not treated me any differently.
Right.
That's got to carry so much weight.
Well, asking her to call you daddy, that's just got to be off the table. Right. And look, we've all been there, but this is like, and she's got to have a reality show, Brian, right? She has to, because you cannot go out into society, like find the picture of them at the beach. You have to be famous if you want to make it as a couple like this, because if you guys are making out at the beach, it looks like open pedophilia. It looks like the guy is trying to walk himself to jail for sex crimes. So it's like, and I mean, think about how many people they get looking at him, and you got to be like, hey, no, here's the thing. She had a brain tumor. You want to see her ID? Come on, man. I'm cool. They got to deal with this all the time. So I get why they got a fucking reality show about it. Right. I mean, but yeah, no, it's like, hey, look, I know guys like young women, but that is like, oh, that's some next level shit. But Gary Coleman, I didn't even put that together. It was Gary Coleman. And who else had this kind of thing? That movie, Patch Adams?
Webster. Patch Adams was about a doctor at a children's hospital.
Sorry. No. What am I talking? Hold on. What am I thinking of? Simon Birch.
You're thinking of Jack?
I'm thinking of, no, Jack was, yeah, the Jack
It was
thing.
the opposite, where he was a kid.
He was getting too old too fast. He had the opposite. Yeah. He looked like he was 50 when he was 18.
Benjamin Button, where he ages in reverse.
That Simon Birch. He had the Simon Birch thing. Do you remember Simon Birch?
Yeah.
He was the tiny little guy that never got any older. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that, it's got to be a porn category. I mean, can you imagine the OnlyFans potential? Why are they wasting their time with network television? Legacy Media's finished. Start an OnlyFans. They'll do Tim Dillon numbers. Would you pay to watch them have sex? Once, at least?
No.
Okay. I will pay Brian's share. I'll pay for two of us, because I'm jerking off to that. I'm at least watching for curiosity. You wouldn't pay to at least curiosity, not as a sexual way.
I'm not paying.
But you for free?
Yeah, I'd check it out.
Okay, but you got to pay. It's OnlyFans. It's OnlyFans.
So I'm not paying.
But look, dude, I mean, I'd like to get these people on the show. I don't know what it has to do with crime or the theme, but I'd like to have them on the show. So yeah. But okay, so we'll round it off. We'll round it off with this, because then we're going to get into the Luis interview. You know that if you're a fan of the show, if you're into the genre, you know that Ovidio Guzman, El Raton, was arrested in Culiacan last month. The military raided. There was a gigantic firefight. It was a battle. It wasn't even one firefight. It was 2 or 3 days of gun battles throughout the city. Luis Chapparro, our friend and Vice News independent journalist, narco journalist extraordinaire, this motherfucker went and snuck into the house where they took Ovidio, where they snatched him up. He was walking through there getting content. I think we've absolutely influenced him to get content and clicks by any means. I think we've been a bad influence on this guy.
No, man, he's been a psycho for a long time.
For sure. But now he's just starting to film it. And he really does have a death wish, because he's walking through there filming the house where they snatched one of the most wanted men in Mexico. And as he's in there, breaking and entering, by the way, we didn't even ask him about that. I think it's a crime. I don't think you can return and enter a private residence, even if it's the scene of a crime. He's breaking and entering, and he runs into Ovidio's mother, Chapo Guzman's, one of his ex-wives, and their lawyers as they're going back into the house. So what did he say to get out of it? Like, what did he tell you he said?
I mean, I think he basically just apologized, was like, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. And he was essentially told, well, look, the call has gone out. You got 5 minutes to get out of here.
Wow. So they called up the troops.
From what I understand is when he got out, he went out to a checkpoint where he had some of his contacts
Right.
and told them, look, I'm out, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And they put a call in and everything.
Right. Everything
was
calmed
good.
down.
Yeah. He does know a lot of these guys. And
Yeah.
so I think he just had to tell the right people, look, it's me, I'm out, I'm done.
Yeah.
And they were able to kind of call it off a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know how much would actually happen considering the amount of heat around the situation.
I think it would depend on how they were feeling, because tensions are high. They're so pissed off. They just got in a huge gunfight. Their adrenaline has just been spiked.
If I'm being honest, I think part of them loved that he was there. Personally, this is me just saying this
because they like the press. The cartel loves the press.
Because,
they do.
Ovidio's mom is trying to sue the Mexican military.
Yeah.
Saying that they destroyed the house, that they used unnecessary force.
Right.
And here is this guy getting footage of this house completely trashed.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it would help her out to have that footage.
That's true. Look, they might even want, like, I don't know, like Luis's testimony, right? They would try to use it. I actually agree with you. They would try to use it as favor because, as you're going to find out in the interview, Ovidio's mother they're suing the Mexican government for abuse of power. I mean, there should be a class action lawsuit against that entire village for, how they went in and how many people they killed. But go watch this interview. You can watch the full interview. We cut this down. You can go watch the full interview over at Patreon, patreon.com/theconnectshow. And you guys call us in with your advice. If you're a member of the Patreon, make sure to leave your name too. Oh yeah, that's one thing we forgot to tell them. Make sure to leave your name because we're going to look you up. If you're not a member of the Patreon, we can't show you love, right? But if you are a member, leave your name. Ask us some advice, business advice, life advice. Ask me anything. You can ask me about my past, right? I know many of you are always hitting me up, wanting to know more details. Ask us that. Check out the episodes we got coming up from New York. We're making another trip very soon. So just support the show, you guys. We're, as you said, the best way to support us is on Patreon. And then, check out this interview. Go watch Luis. He extrapolates everything that we talk about when it comes to the cartel. We'll talk to you next week. Take care. Okay, so we have Luis Chapparro here, friend of the show. If you have not or just joining the Connect for the first time, Luis is the #1 journalist in all of Latin America. That's not me saying that. This is a fact. He is soon to win a Pulitzer Prize. He specializes in narcotraficando and covering all of the narcos in Latin America. We filmed 2 amazing episodes with him in Culiacan. And this guy's got a death wish. I got to say, we got really scared because a month ago, Ovidio Guzman, son of El Chapo, if you're not living under a rock, you saw that the Marines went in and extracted him from Culiacan, and it looks like they're probably going to extradite him. Our boy Luis, chasing the story, went down there 3 days later and got exclusive footage inside of Ovidio's house. I mean, I can't even say it without sweating. So we had to bring him on. We had to hear what the fuck is going on. Luis, good to have you, buddy.
Hey, Johnny, how you doing, my man?
I'm good, dude. What did your wife say when you told her you went into Ovidio's house?
I don't think we even had much time to really think about it, or for her or my family to actually think about it. Like, I woke up that morning when they captured Ovidio, and 3 days later, I was booking shit tons of flights to Culiacan while dealing with security and legal departments on my way to Culiacan. So that was like a super fast-paced move.
Did you anticipate actually going into his house? Was that on your mind before you flew down there?
Not really. What I wanted to do is I wanted to go to that town where they capture him, to Jesus Maria, trying to understand what the neighbors lived, because apparently what I've heard that back then was that the gunfight lasted for 10 hours and that there was a lot of people disappeared, a bunch of kids killed. So I wanted to report on the ground what happened in that town. Never really thought about, breaking in Ovidio's house.
Yeah, and it's just something that you kind of thought spur of the moment, hey, this is this is good content.
Yes, I mean, yeah, sort of. Like more than that, I think when I arrived there, I was expecting like military presence, probably other journalists, like taking photos or doing like some reporting. But instead of that, I got like everything was fucking empty. So the sicarios were already taking the place back. So they had set up like different checkpoints that were like circling around their motorcycles. And then I met Ovidio's mom and his attorneys. And when they left, well, that's what actually sparked first my idea, right? Because I thought like, wow, this is Ovidio's mom. I might ask her for permission to go in the house because they were just coming out the house. But they were not friendly at all, man. I mean,
so you met Chapo's mother. You met Chapo's wife, I guess.
Chapo's former wife. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Wife. Was that wife number one?
No, I think she was the wife before Emma Coronel, the one he has now, the one who's also in jail, but also Griselda Lopez is flagged by the U.S. Department of Treasury as a crucial key player for the Sinaloa cartel. So I have seen her photo before. That's how I knew that was Griselda Lopez.
Wow. So she's Chapo's first wife. Ovidio's mother is probably a player or had something to do being active with the cartel is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I mean, literally what the U.S. says is that she has been helping the Sinaloa cartel to keep their operations with like her, I think it's like basically they're accusing of like money laundering for the Sinaloa cartel.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what you would use like a woman for, not wet work, not trafficking, but as a bag lady, right? Yes,
exactly. I think that's the role that the U.S. allege that she's playing. My sources said that she was actually in the house when the Mexican military raided the place. Apparently, she and three of Ovidio's daughters, his three daughters, were like extracted from the place. And I guess it took her a couple of days to be back in the house. And they were taking photos. I'm pretty sure they were taking photos from all the stuff that was missing from Ovidio's house.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And so so she caught you guys. It was her and her bodyguard or somebody, her driver.
Yeah, it was her and two of the Ovidio attorneys. So I think those two guys were working for Ovidio, trying to get him out of jail.
Right.
And they're going to sue the Mexican government. So yeah.
For what? For coming into the house with kids there?
Yeah, I think what they're going to sue is for abuse of power, because they literally shot at all of the town, including kids. Old women, elder people, like they shot all the fucking town from the sky down. If you go into the houses, you can see like many of the ceilings, a lot of the walls, washing machine was all riddled with bullets. So they literally started just like, trying to kill the whole fucking town. And they entered Ovidio's house when his three young daughters were in, and also they looted the fucking place, man. You could see the Rolex boxes open with a bunch of like missing jewelry, missing watches.
Yeah.
So they took everything.
Well, that surprises nobody if you know Mexican police or Mexican military.
Exactly.
So I remember seeing, when all those clips started coming out, there was a helicopter. It was an amateur footage of a helicopter from the sky, and you just see these orange streaks across the dark sky, just shooting down, bam, 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 bam. Would that probably have been in the town, shooting at his house? Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That was in the
Wow.
town. They not only shot Ovidio's house, they literally shot the whole town. It's a small town. I think there's like 2,000 people living there, so it's really a very small town. And yeah, they destroyed every single car in the town. every single window. They asked everybody from the town to step out of their houses and leave for 2 days before they could come back to their places. And they looted like some of the places. These old man living right next to Ovidio in a very humble house, he was telling me that the military stole his deodorant and some teacups, some tennis shoes. He's like, why would they want my fucking deodorant, man? Like, he was super angry, man.
What was the casualty count? What is the civilian casualty count? What was the cartel casualty count? And then what about the military?
Well, the official count is around 29 people. 19 of them allegedly sicarios for the Sinaloa cartel, and then 10 of them Mexican military officers. But the people from Jesus Maria is saying that the casualties are above 100, 120. That's without counting for the missing person. There's a lot of missing kids, young kids.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Were they kidnapped? Were they just dead and rotting in the mountain? Or how could all those kids go missing?
I think that's definitely a possibility. What people believe is that they took these kids thinking probably that they were sicarios or something, but we're talking about like 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, and they grab them and probably kill them and throw them out in the mountains. There is a group called buscadoras, the searchers, probably. That's what it will translate. And they search in Sinaloa for missing people, and they usually find dead bodies that have been buried underground. So they just recently started the search for all the people that got disappeared from Ovidio's operation the Mexican military operation to capture Ovidio.
Wow. So you could just snatch, as many kids as you can get your hands on. And this is an organized raid from the top. This is the highest command in Mexico is ordering this raid, and they're stealing old man's deodorant, and they're basically massacring children and dumping them in the mountains. Exactly.
That's what is like completely, like weird for the local residents. They feel like they captured a video within the first 10 minutes of the operation, but they kept fighting or at least shooting down the town for 10 hours, which is, why the fuck did they do that, right? It's just so weird.
Isn't it because the sicarios came out and started engaging them?
Yes, the sicarios came out trying to stop the Mexican military from taking Ovidio. But he was out after 10 minutes. He was already flying in a chopper from Sinaloa to Mexico City. I guess the Mexican military could have also just like stopped and leave, right?
Yeah. That level of brutality. It kind of reminds you of the 80s and the massacres in Nicaragua and El Salvador, like the massacre at El Mozote and stuff like that. Using like the communist guerrilla fighters is like a pretext to just slaughter people. That's kind of, this raid has hints of that.
Yes, definitely, man. It really is shameful that the Mexican government, basically ransacked the whole town, knowing that there were like a bunch of old people, a bunch of families, kids, that Ovidio himself, I know he's a criminal. I know he's part of probably the biggest criminal organization out there. But he also had three daughters, 3, 6, and 12, sleeping inside his house. And when the Mexican army says they did a clean operation, because that's how they labeled this operation, it was a clean operation. It was up to Ovidio's capture. But the aftermath was, in my opinion, was absolutely unnecessary. I think they went with the thinking that the whole town was just of sicarios, right? Like every single one in Jesus Maria is a sicario.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. Why? Why now? Why Ovidio? What happened? What's really going on?
I think Ovidio had it coming, man. As you remember from Culiacan is a small town. It's a great city, but it's a small city. And Los Chapitos got a hold of the city after El Chapo Guzman got extradited in 2017. Ever since they became, like the lords of Culiacan. And even on top of Mayo Zambada, one of the original founders of the Sinaloa cartel, probably the oldest drug lord inside the Sinaloa cartel. And so they were very flashy. They were putting themselves out there too much. And when Ovidio got married, I think he got married in 2000. I can't remember, but probably around that same year, 16, probably 17. And they closed like 2 or 3 blocks from the church where he was getting married with his henchmen, with sicarios, basically, to have a happy wedding on the church, right? So that was very flashy. That was too in the face of the Mexican government. There's also rumors that they became hyper violent against, like the regular citizen in Culiacan, which hasn't happened before. So I guess that's what they tried to capture him in 2019 for the first time in a shameful operation that basically the sicarios forced the Mexican government to release Ovidio after, making like blockages, burning buses, cars, breaking like 100 people from the local prison to fight against the Mexican military. And at the end, what they did is they sprayed gasoline on the house of the families of the Mexican militaries participating in the operation, and threatened to just like burn everybody inside those houses if they didn't let Ovidio go. So yes, they twisted an arm of the government.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Luis, we love having you on as usual. We're glad you're in America, safe. God bless this country. God bless Mexico. Follow Luis on Instagram, first of all. What's your Instagram?
It's at Luis Kuriaki. It's a bit tricky because it's KurYki, Kuriaki.
Yes, and Luis Chapparro on YouTube, correct?
On YouTube, yes. That's easy. And then, that's easy. Yeah.
And then do you have anything else like your newsletter or your Patreon? And your book, of course. You got to plug your book too, right?
Yeah, man. I actually have my original copy right here. If you go to my website, L as my first initial, and then Chaparro, you'll see this photo book, which is called A Year Reporting Inside the Narco World. This is for all 2022, and you have all sorts of different photos from inside criminal organizations working with human trafficking, drug trafficking, cartels, sicarios, and a beautiful photo of myself holding an Uzi.
That's right. And fun fact, producer Brian and myself were sitting 2 feet away from him when he was holding that thing.
There was a point where I actually pointed the fucking Uzi to these guys, and the guy on my right was like, just take the charger off, because
yeah. Some cartel guys were very nice. They said, I'm going to have to ask you to go ahead and point that thing to the floor, Luis.
Yes, exactly.
Do you ever consider carrying a gun? Seriously, do you ever, you're in Chapo's house, and look, I know if sicarios come into Ovidio's house while you're there getting photographs and then want to kill you, it doesn't matter if you're strapped or not. But don't you feel like taking some of them with you ever?
You know what? I mean, that's something that I do on my own will and by my own will. And I go and mess, and that's quote unquote mess, on their turf. They're doing their fucking shit and I'm poking my nose. So I wouldn't think it's fair for me to bring a fucking gun. That will be even more disrespectful. I'm never going to try to be disrespectful. But again, they also have to know that this is my job, and I'm not after them to trying to, capture them. I'm not fucking police. That's not my job, right? My job is to write stories coming from their side of the world and listen to their perspectives as well, and include their perspectives on my stories. So I don't feel the need to use a gun. Now, in my house, I do own a gun, because that's a different thing, right? If they come to my house where my family is trying to harm, hurt anyone of my family, I'm definitely not gonna go clean, you know?
Yeah, and by the way you hold that Uzi, we know you can shoot straight.
yeah, exactly. I'm gonna be fucking holding that shit backwards, you know?
Exactly. Well, I think you'll be all right. You know what you're doing. So we're just so grateful that we have you. We have a copy of his book too. You gotta go pick that up. If you love what we do, if you love the stories that we bring you, I mean, we owe much of it to this man, Luis Chapparro. Go buy that book. We're going to put the link in the description of this episode, of this video. Luis, thank you so much, buddy. Let's meet up soon. Let's have you back on ASAP.
Compa Johnny, anytime, man. It was a fucking pleasure to see your face again.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care. Andale.
Bye, compa.